Welcome back to Lead Well with Jackie. I am your host, Jackie Butler. Today's episode is all about navigating your career with intention. Whether you're at a crossroads, craving change, or simply asking what's next, this conversation is for you. I am joined by the brilliant Bronwyn Wilson, a career coach and mentor with a vast background in HR and recruitment, who supports people in defining what they truly want and positioning themselves to go after it. We're going to talk about how to align your next steps with your values and life stage, how to build a personal brand that speaks for you, and how to approach the job search in a modern and meaningful way. So if you're ready to stop drifting and start driving your career, let's dive in. Most importantly, welcome, Bronwyn.
Thank you very much, Jackie. So nice to be here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you. When we've been speaking before, in preparation for today's recording, we both had highlighted that we've seen particularly women at a certain point in their career who have gone, like, what do I actually want from this? And I know I had a client recently who was in her mid-50s at an executive level and had never made a conscious choice about what she wanted her career to be and what her goal was. So what is the first thing that people should ask themselves when they find themselves at this kind of career crossroad?
Yeah, so really the thing that you need to be asking yourself is, if I could create the ideal role for me right now that suits my current life stage, because that's the piece that's actually quite important, because your life ebbs and flows, things change through your life, you move through different stages, and the career that you had perhaps in your early 20s may not suit the life stage that you have in your mid-40s. So really thinking about what would be the perfect role. If I could curate something right now that would fit my lifestyle, what would that look like? And that, when you're thinking about what that could look like, that's going to include things like, how many hours do I want to work? How do I want to work those hours? What sort of actual job responsibilities do I like doing and would I like to be doing in my day-to-day work? Where would I like my role to be located? What sort of perks would I like to have in this role? And really kind of throw everything at it, your complete wish list for what you would like. That is the first step.
And I think that it's important that we're really casting a pretty wide net here, because I know a lot of people, I'm sure that you must see this as well, where people go, oh, but that doesn't exist. And I know I can't get, they kind of already applying a bit of a lens of what's out there. But what I'm hearing from you is, no, first step, this is blue sky thinking. Like, what would perfect look like? Yes, you can make accommodations according to the real world eventually. Is that fair to say? Like, just cast it really wide and cover all bases.
Yes. The second piece to that people can get confused by, though, is they're thinking too much with their head and not enough with their heart. So many of us, we study or we have a qualification or we've done some sort of training in a particular area, and we're just so excited and grateful to get that first job. And then perhaps we get a promotion, we are transferred to a different area, we're getting lots of experience, and we just kind of bounce through our career, and then we wake up one day and go, how did I get here? I'm not even sure I really like what I'm doing, but I'm now getting a salary that's allowing me to pay for all of my financial commitments, and my lifestyle complements that. And I haven't actually formally interviewed for a role, so my resume is very out of date, and I really am not prepared at all for the job market. And I don't even really know what my transferable skills are. I'm not even sure what my values are in terms of what I actually want. So the thought of even creating this ideal role is almost too big to even consider. And that is where the career coaching can really help, because understanding what your values are, understanding what your, I have a yoga background, I'm a yoga teacher, and I've very much tapped into that yoga philosophy around self-inquiry and truly understanding why I'm actually here to, what am I here to do? What do I what's the purpose? And for me personally, I've had some experience in my life through illness in my family and lots of change around those sorts of things that have forced me to question what is it all about. And I've recognized that, well, we only get one life and this is it. So why would I be sitting in a career that I don't actually like, spending my days doing that when what I really want to be doing is over here? The challenge is, how do I get from here to there? That's the piece. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love that, Bron. I just think, sometimes I'll just say to someone, if you say, what do you want? People go, ooh, like I've had clients burst into tears just from me saying that, because they're like, I don't know where to start. But I love the thought of, well, when are you in flow? Like when do you, if you look back at your entire life up until this date, what was your heyday? Like when did you really feel like you were living aligned to whatever that is, to your purpose, to your spirit, whatever? Because that is going to give you maybe not the actual job, maybe not the tasks, maybe not the salary, maybe not the level of seniority, but it's going to give you some really important clues as to what is resonant for you. So if it's too daunting to look at this big blank space being the future and create something that's vast, look back and use that data to inform what your ideal role would be.
Yeah, exactly. What you're talking about is what I like to refer to as living as your authentic self. So really living to who you truly are. And what I find is that some people are so caught on the hamster wheel of keeping up with the Joneses and having to have the next great holiday or buy the new car or get the bigger house or do the renovation or whatever it is, that they are sort of trapped in this cycle of needing to have that job, to pay for all the things, to live this beautiful life that looks amazing on the outside, but actually how many of those people are truly happy and truly living their authentic, aligned with their authentic selves and aligned to their true values? Because really, when you are sitting in the aged care facility looking back at your life, are you going to be able to sort of hand on heart say, yeah, I really lived aligned to my values. I showed up as my authentic self. And as a result of that, everybody around me felt that change in energy and they felt that sense of wanting to be around me because I was living, doing the things that brought me joy.
Yeah. One of the flags that I notice is if you're saying the word should, I should earn this much, I should be at this level, I should have this many direct reports, I should. It's such a useful and easy indicator that you're making decisions based on external expectations rather than from
looking
intrinsic.
Inward. Yeah. And to pick up on what you mentioned before around if coming up with that blue sky idea is too much, reflecting on your past and thinking about a point in time when you really felt most aligned with yourself, when you were really pumped about life, when you were just loving it. What was that environment that you were in? What was the situation? What were the kinds of things that you were doing? What kind of people were you surrounded by? And those are the things that are going to give you the clues around the sort of environment, the culture, the team that you want to work in, and the sorts of values that you have that you would then want to apply in your workplace. That helps.
You mentioned something before which was around values and how our values can shape our career. Can you tell us a little bit about what would that look like?
The values piece is interesting. There's lots of tools online that you can do free assessments to,
including on my website.
Oh, there you go. Including on Jackie's website.
Worksheet on leadwellco.com.au. I'll link it in the caption. Thanks for the plug there, bro.
Yeah, perfect. That was a great segue. So I had a client recently, actually, who most of my clients are people who've been in their role or an organization for quite a long time. They've been promoted and then they've either reached a ceiling or they've woken up one day and realized that there is a complete misalignment. And they may not realize what that misalignment is, that it's actually a values misalignment, but they've woken up one day going, I actually don't like going into work anymore. I don't really like the people I'm working with. I don't enjoy the culture and the environment. And I'm just grinding away because that's my job and I have to pay the bills. And so I'm just going to keep on going. And I had a client recently who was in a situation who had been in an organization for about 10 years and promoted internally, had reached a ceiling and was thinking about, well, what else could I do? And at no stage in his career had he ever truly sat back and thought, well, what do I actually want? And what are my skills and what are my values and what do I really want to get out of my career? I just know that I don't really want to be doing this, and I know that I like these sorts of bits. But what he identified through my working styles and preferences assessment, what we were able to work out is that he really had a very strong value around kindness, compassion, and equity and fairness. And what had happened in his organisation over time, there'd been a change of leadership, change of culture. And what was once a very fair, equitable, kind, compassionate organisation had turned into one that was very cutthroat, where there was not a lot of care about people's personal situations and supporting them through various changes or issues that they might be having in their life, even if those employees were high performers and had been there for a long time. And so then he started to find a real disconnect personally between himself and the way that others were being treated in the organisation. And so really understanding what his values were and understanding the reason for this sense of discomfort that he didn't want to stay with anymore. Because in work, there are areas where there is a bit of discomfort and sometimes you just have to push through that. But this was a real values misalignment where he thought, I actually don't want to stay here.
Yeah. I love that saying, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything or something along those lines. And I think that when we don't know what our values are, and it is a process to really figure out and really pressure test what they are, it is, and I'm sure you see this a lot, like in that example, like you just go, but why am I uncomfortable? It's more of an emotional sort of intrinsic, like I just feel off, but I don't know why. And my rational brain is like, it's fine. Everything's fine. I'm tracking along fine. And I should be doing these things.
I should.
Should, right?
Yeah.
But I think that it's an important point. It's like, well, if you're just feeling discomfort that is not stretching you toward your potential, but there's a discomfort or some emotion in you that's saying this is off, do a check-in with your values, because there's a good chance that that is the core. I remember, I'm not going to tell you every story that's ever happened in my career, but I do remember at one meeting, I have cried maybe, a small amount of times in my career, in my workplace. But I remember one time, and I was talking to our CEO and our COO, and I was being asked to do something. And the tears started coming. Like I wasn't sort of crying, but all of a sudden, and I remember saying, just pretend this isn't happening. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's going on. And then when I left the room, it just clicked to me, and I was like, I'm being asked to do something that is inauthentic, and authenticity is my number one value. And my body told me it was wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such an important point. So this, not to get all yogi on you, but
I love yogis. Yogi it up.
For me, that piece is so important. And through some things that have happened in my life, and some self-inquiry that I've done as a result of my yoga training and things, tuning into your body's physiological reaction to situations will tell you everything that you need to know.
And I think then use that information to make choices. You know, like in my example, that one off, I didn't do what I was asked to do. And I ended up actually, the CEO ended up apologizing to me. And I think that he realized that he had overstepped, and that was fine. It was a one-off. I was okay to continue. If I had been forced to continue to do that, or if I was consistently feeling that way, then it might be a sign that the environment's not right for me.
That's right. Yeah.
So, okay, we've come to a crossroad. We've figured out blue sky thinking. This would be my dream role. We've figured out what our values are and what would align most closely with those values. Now let's sort of move toward the action, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of rhetoric out there about personal brand. And so I want to really sort of understand from you, what does that mean?
Yeah. Personal brand. So to come back to your point, so we've gone through, say, for example, you came to Sharpen Up and you did a working styles assessment with me, and we worked out, right, here's your strengths. Here are your, what I call development areas, or things you don't really like doing very much. Based on our conversation and looking at your action orientation and operative function, these are the kinds of ideal roles that would suit you. This is the kind of company culture that would work best for you. This is a sort of team. This is a kind of leadership style. So we've kind of narrowed down the focus, right?
Right. Thank you for that, because we were broad, but so that's where you actually go, okay.
Yeah. I give a 2-page report that summarizes you in a nutshell in terms of your working styles and preferences. And I don't tell you the exact role, but I tell you the kinds of aspects that a role should include. And then I tell you what kind of a culture would work best, what size organization, what kind of leadership it has, those sorts of things. So you then are clear on, okay, this is where I will thrive. The next step, in my view, is that you've got to work out, how am I presenting to the market? So that is all the things that you would use in an application process. So your resume. So what does your resume actually say about you? You would probably, if you're in a corporate role, you are going to have a LinkedIn profile. How old is that profile? What's the profile picture on there? Does the profile match what's in your resume? And within LinkedIn, if you have commented on different things or you've put posts on different things, what does that tell a potential recruiter about who you are and what you value and what your way of operating is? Because they will then use that to assess whether you might be suitable for their culture or as part of the screening process. So in terms of your personal brand, it's how you're presenting to the market. So your resume would be the next thing that I look at. So most people have a resume, but it's maybe out of date, or it doesn't have all of the key information that it should have on it. Or a recruiter needs to sift through 1 million bullet points before they can identify whether there's some components in there that actually meet the criteria that they're trying to search for. Because a recruiter, whether it be an agent or whether it be an in-house recruiter or whether it be a local level hiring manager, they are going to have written a job ad, probably, and that job ad ideally should be based on a position description. Sometimes it's not, depending on the size of the organization. But regardless, they would have thought about a couple of key criteria that the person they are going to hire into the business needs to have. And they need to be able to look at your application and quickly identify whether you tick those boxes. And then if they go, yep, great, tick, you go into a shortlist pile. And it might be a long list, it could be a short list, depends on how the recruiter wants to do it, depends on how many applications they receive. But you will go into the yes pile for now. If it's too hard for the recruiter to find that information, you might go into the no pile. So your resume needs to be sharp, and that would be the next thing that I would work with a client on to update. And then the next piece is looking at LinkedIn, and does that profile marry up?
Yeah, got you. Okay. I have lots of questions on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, but
Yeah.
just on resumes,
Yes.
what role does a cover letter play in that?
So what I like to do is when I update a resume, the first page acts as a summary. So it's got an overview of who you are and what you're looking for. If that doesn't align with their organization, then they will cull you straight away, and that's a blessing, really, because it means you're not going to be the right fit. So you need to put in there a bit about you and what you're looking for. Then you have summary of your qualifications and education, a summary of your career history. So literally just high level job title, company and duration. And then a couple of bullet points highlighting your key skills and experience. That's the front page. And that really should be able to tick their key criteria boxes. And then if they go, yep, that's interesting, I like that, then they can, well, they're not going to use the page because in this day and age they're scrolling on a screen, but they'll be able to scroll further down and find then the further information that you would have sitting behind that first page, which will have detail around each of those roles and the responsibilities that you held and the achievements that you made in each of those roles. So that's how I would structure a resume. To answer the question about the cover letter, when I'm coaching people for career coaching and they have clearly identified a role that they want and they're like, yep, this is where I want to go, I encourage them to call the recruiter. There's usually a number on the ad, or you can just call the company and say, I'd like to speak to the hiring manager for X role, and try and have a conversation with that person to ascertain whether that role might be suitable for you. So have some key questions that you want to ask, and you can just say, hi, it's Bronwyn. I'm interested in applying for this particular role. Just wanted to ask a few questions, and they might be some things that are valuable to you that we've identified through the assessment. And then if you decide, yep, I really like this role, I'm going to apply, I would then do a cover letter. It doesn't need to be lengthy, but in that cover letter, cite the fact that you had that conversation. It was lovely to speak with you. Thanks for your time on the phone on X date. Really appreciated the insights that you gave me, and drop into the cover letter some of the things that the recruiter or the hiring manager said to you, and then address how you can meet that in your cover letter. It needs only be 2 or 3 paragraphs. Yeah. But what that does is it differentiates you from every other application that, somebody has just thrown in a Seek application because they saw it, or they've seen it on LinkedIn and they say apply now, and their resume just uploads. If you've gone to that extra effort to call and cite it, then they go, oh yeah, I remember that I had a chat with that person. They were good. Yeah, I'll put them in the yes pile. It's just finding ways to differentiate yourself from everybody else. And it has the added benefit of you being able to discern whether this role is even worth your time, because that is the other important piece. Going for interviews and waiting around for feedback is exhausting. It is emotionally draining. And if you go into it without knowing, yeah, this is actually what I really want, then you could be just wasting your time. So you want to try to minimize wasting your time by funneling it down. And if you can talk to the recruiter, that is one great way to do it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because remember, the whole premise of this is that we're being more intentional with our career choices rather than just going, I'll just take what I can get.
Yeah.
So now I'm keen to understand, how important is our LinkedIn profile?
Yeah. I think LinkedIn is important, and I think that is important because we do have other platforms. There's Facebook, there's Instagram, and absolutely recruiters are looking at those, by the way, when they're screening for candidates. I will come back to LinkedIn, but just on Facebook and Instagram, when they say you've made the shortlist and they decide, yeah, we really like this person, we'll just have a look at their Facebook and Instagram. If there are posts on there or photos on there or comments on there that you have made that do not align with the company's culture that you're trying to apply within, they may have a question on your fit, on your suitability. You may then go to the no pile. So, and that's okay. That, like, if you go to the no pile because of something that you've put and because there is a misalignment, then that's great. That's a save, because you don't want to take a job where there is a cultural misalignment. That's good. But LinkedIn is a platform where you can actually present your own views and your own personal brand. And LinkedIn also is a platform where recruiters are able to search for your profile, and you can be what's called headhunted. So LinkedIn needs to be up to date. So your LinkedIn profile needs to reflect what's on your resume, for starters. There should be consistency. There should not be a job that appears on your resume that is missing from your LinkedIn profile, for example, or vice versa. And same with education. In terms of the actual profile, you need to have a photo that is relevant. So you need to be able to see your face. No sunglasses, no hats, no like casual. It's professional.
But also have one. Like I think
have a photo.
So many people don't have a photo, and it
and
takes away the connection.
It does, and you don't need a photo on your resume. But LinkedIn, that is the right place to have a photo. There is a section on LinkedIn that is called Introduction. It's the section that appears directly under the photo that provides a quick snapshot of who you are without the recruiter having to click into your profile. So it's good to have that piece completed. You should have a summary of yourself in the About section, and then make sure that all your experience aligns with your resume. Have your websites of the companies that you worked for included. And the other piece that I would say is super important with LinkedIn is there's an ability to add in skills. You can see it's a pop-up box. You click on that and you select the skills that you had to demonstrate in that particular role. That's important to do. And the reason for that is coming to my next point about LinkedIn Recruiter. This is a tool or a product that LinkedIn sells to various organizations, and most recruitment agents use it as well. And it essentially gives them access to the back end of LinkedIn where they can create jobs. So say they're recruiting for a sales manager, they can create a sales manager role. They can select key criteria that role is requiring to fulfill. They can select certain skills that they need the person to have, education, location. They can pretty much drill it down to as wide a net or narrow as they want. And then they click search, and it will pull every person's profile that fits the criteria that they have set. So the more pieces of information that your personal LinkedIn profile has, the higher likelihood that your profile will be picked up in a search like that. And then if you picked up in a search and they look at your profile and they go, yep, this person meets the criteria, I'm now going to contact them. It'll usually be via an email, which is the LinkedIn's messaging system. Yep. They'll send you an email and say, hi, I'm Joe Bloggs from blah, blah recruitment, and your profile's come up in a search. We're interested in talking to you about the sales manager role. If you're interested, let us know. And that is legit. And if you're interested, great. And if you are in a position where you're wanting to put out to the universe that you want to shift and a change, then that is a great way to do it. Have your profile up to date with all the skills listed, and you will then be much more likely to be selected. The other thing that you can do on LinkedIn once you're in there is, once you've identified the organizations that you might be aligned with, that you would like to work for, you can follow those organizations. You can start to comment on their posts, and then that puts you on the radar of the people working in that organization, who might then go, oh, this person's commenting on our things, they like us, we might look at them for a role. Or, it exposes you to more. And it is a networking connections based tool. And that's why I think having a LinkedIn profile is very relevant in today's world.
And I think one thing that you really drove home there for me is around the language that you use in terms of the skills, and your intro should mirror what you see in job ads, in position descriptions.
Yes.
Like sometimes people can get a little bit artistic and creative with the wording that they're using, and they want to sound a bit more sophisticated or more experienced or whatever. But if you are using literally a different word to what is the standard or the norm, or what keywords that recruiter is going to be putting into that search, you're going to fall through the net.
Yes.
So that feels really important.
Yes.
And then one other thing that just led me to think of, you know, in LinkedIn, how you can put like an open to work
Yes.
banner. Do you recommend that people do? I'm always really iffy with those. Like,
I
do you
am
recommend
too.
people do it?
I'm iffy to do it when I'm working in an organization already.
Well, that's what because sometimes
Because
you'll be working with someone and you'll go, oh, they've put open to work.
yeah, which
Work
so
here.
does that mean that they are very unhappy here and they're looking to leave and they
Yeah.
haven't said anything and this is all a bit awkward? Yeah, I think there's a time and a place for that. I personally I feel weird about putting open to work. And the other thing is you don't need to have open to work up in order to be selected for your profile to come through on a search. So it doesn't limit your ability to be headhunted if you haven't got open to work up. Yeah, I'm about preserving relationships and making sure that I'm being honest with my employer. And even if I am unhappy and I'm thinking about leaving, I wouldn't want to just splash it on LinkedIn without having a conversation to say, I actually am looking to move on. I don't like it here.
So you've outlined what our profile should look like. What about the rest of our activity on LinkedIn? Should we be, you know, you see people that post every day or multiple times a day and comment 28 times. Like, is that necessary if we're looking to shift our jobs, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you should definitely be active on LinkedIn, but that doesn't mean you have to post every day. The thing with LinkedIn is the more connections you have, the more exposure you have. So I would be trying to build your connections as a priority and do that with people. The easiest option first up is to build connections with people you already work with. And then the next layer is people you've worked with in the past. In terms of posting, when you post on LinkedIn, it puts your profile in front of more people. So when you go into LinkedIn and you know how you get the notifications and it tells you different things, if you're posting or you're commenting on things, then your name comes up in those notification lists within your connections. So it just puts you front of mind, really. And if you're posting on things that's somebody else has commented on, then it puts your profile across other people's connections that you may not be connected to. So it just broadens your scope. And the things that you post on really can be anything that you find interesting. So if something happened at work, you won a client, you finished a big project, you maybe read a statistic that's quite interesting or relevant to your role, you can then post that and put a comment, like add a comment, and it gives a sense of who you are and what you value, and it tells a little story about you, which is good for a recruiter who might be looking at your profile and trying to decide what you're about. And yes, okay, you meet this key criteria, but would you fit our company culture? And so whether it's yes or a no, that is good because you want to make sure you're aligned to that company's culture before you say yes to a role. So if this is part of the vetting tool, that's perfect. So there's lots of different ways that you can get exposure on LinkedIn without having to come up with some amazing, content calendar. It doesn't need to be like that. It can literally just be a little bit organic. Maybe, I don't know, once a week would probably be enough on a personal profile.
And I think, taking what we spoke about in terms of what your ideal role would be and then distilling that down into, okay, well, what do I want my personal brand to be? What do I stand for? Can also inform a lot of, so if you want to be a thought leader in marketing, then you might write an article on LinkedIn once a month and share it, or you might write posts with slightly respectfully dissenting opinions, or you might bring, I know someone who runs an agency and she'll find great marketing campaigns and she'll do a post on LinkedIn dissecting what did this campaign do really well and what could they have done better and what they could learn from and what the market reaction was or whatever, because that's her personal brand as the owner of a marketing agency, to be a thought leader in marketing. So what I'm getting from this is being front of mind, being active, being again intentional with what you're posting and what you're putting out even into the world, let alone on LinkedIn, so that you are creating this image of yourself that you have chosen. You know? And I know you mentioned before about just checking your other social media platforms. I used to come in at the second round of interviews when someone was being interviewed for my team, and someone got to the second interview and I said, I'll just Google them. And their Facebook profile picture, they were naked. So
was that not in alignment with your corporate organisation?
A big flank tattoo, and they were showing it off, but they were completely naked and just strategically covering things up. And I thought, probably not. You know, like, because that's what you're putting out into the world. If that's your personal brand, then how will you go as a custodian for this brand that is very different in values? It's not a judgment, but it's there may be a disconnection here, which, as you said, and I like how you've mentioned this a few times, like, it's not about doing things so that a recruiter or a hiring manager will always say yes to you. Like, it's not about bending yourself to be most hireable. It's about, like, for that person, we didn't have a good cultural fit.
That they would not have enjoyed working in your organisation if they were stuck to these kind of rigid rules. Where potentially, whereas they may be a better culture fit for an organisation that's different to that. And so discerning that in the beginning is much better than having a person start. Anyone who has hired an individual into a business and then done all the training and taken them through the induction and spent the time, and then 6 months later realised this person is just not a fit, it is not working. It's hard because you've invested so much time, you've lost that time, your time as the leader, plus trying to bring that person up to speed. The team is filling the gaps, they're all working more, everybody's annoyed because they're having to pick up the slack, and then you've got to let that person go because it was the wrong hire. It is much better to be true to yourself and have what you want to have on your profile, on your LinkedIn, on your resume. Be clear about who you are and stay true to your authentic self. And if that means that you are rejected through a recruitment process, great, because it means you've not wasted your time. Wait for the right role. And if someone rejects you, it's meant to be.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can, acknowledging that, you know, we will all eventually have a point where financial requirements will drive us, you know, will drive our decision making. But I actually had a friend who worked in recruitment years and years ago. I was telling her how much I was loving my job, and she said to me, sounds like a great time for you to start looking. And I was so offended. I was like, what? Have you been listening? Like, I love my job. I would never leave. But now in hindsight, I get it.
Yeah.
Because I had no concept of what was available or what was out there or what might be even more amazing. But her point was, look when you don't have to jump.
Yes. Yeah, when you're comfortable.
Yeah,
and to your point about balancing it with necessity, that is one of the things that I talk about through the in my career coaching in the assessment piece, is around what are your non-negotiables. So it's great to have all these ideals of, you know, I want to work for an organisation like this and I only want to work 20 hours a week, but I want to earn this much money. And there has to be a balance. So what are the priorities? If you rank them, and what are the things that you absolutely can't budge on? And you've got to get really clear around the value set. So yeah, I do value earning this much money. I need to earn this much. Okay, so how many hours does that mean if you were to earn this amount in a salary? You know, and that means you're going to be at this level. That may mean you have to manage a team. Do you want to manage a team? You know, so we're sort of talking about those sorts of things and trying to drill it down, because there is the reality of paying for life's expenses and balancing it with what you truly want.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important. If you want to earn 250 grand a year and work 5 hours a week, there might be a disconnect there. and a compromise that's going to be required. Okay, so we know the type of role that we're looking for. We know what we're willing to compromise on. We've made sure that our personal brand and our activity online is being done with intention.
Mm-hmm.
Take us through the search itself.
Yeah. What you want to avoid doing is this concept of that scattergun approach. So, and I know I did this at the start of my career. I was so desperate to get a job, any job. I just wanted it to be in human resources. And I was just applying for everything and just throwing resumes out everywhere, hoping that one would stick. And so we want to avoid the scattergun approach. So you must at the start work out what you want and then be intentional about the application process. So if you're looking on Seek, I like looking at job boards. Seek and LinkedIn, they've all got job boards. You can have searches set up that send you notifications. You don't even have to do anything. It'll just come straight to your inbox. You can search through those and be discerning. So when you read it, if there is a part of you that goes, actually, that's going to be too junior for me, or there's too much, operational work there, I'm not going to like that, do not apply for it. Or if it's interesting and you're curious about it, make the phone call, have a conversation with the recruiter, and then decide if you want to apply for it. So be very intentional with with what you do apply for. Mm-hmm. Same with if you're headhunted. If you receive a call from a recruiter who have found your profile and they want to talk to you about a role, you can be open to that and have the conversation, but it's all right for you to actually say, I don't think this is for me. So you've got to be really discerning with it. So recruiters are exceptionally well connected typically in the market that they are recruiting for. Usually it's a particular type of function or industry. So finding a recruiter that's relevant for you is going to be important. And the purpose of a recruiter is not necessarily to work on your behalf to find you a job, though they will try to. If you're a good candidate who will fit the brief for roles that are coming across their desk, they will absolutely want to put you into a role. So it is always good to have some recruiters on hand that you've got a good relationship with, who understand what your skills are and what you're really looking for. Because if a role does come across their desk that they think, oh, Jackie would be really good for that, I'll give her a call and see if she'd be interested, they would have already considered whether this role might be good for you because they know a bit about you already. They've had a chat, and then they'll call you, have a chat, and you can decide whether you want more information or not, or whether it's a hard no. So that is another avenue that you can have. So you've really got your direct approach, you've got your recruitment agency approach, and then you've got your potential for being headhunted and approached.
Mm-hmm. And when you're looking at, let's say you've got a job in mind, there's this statistic that's always kind of bandied about where men will apply if they meet 60% of the criteria, women will wait till they meet 100% of the criteria.
Yeah.
And this just came up for me earlier when you were talking about, identifying what your gaps are. And
yes,
should people be, do we need to meet 100% of the criteria?
No, we don't. And in fact, this has happened recently to another client of mine where she had been the leader she was a sales manager. So she was leading a team of salespeople and was in sales herself, responsible for bringing in new clients and client relationship management, and then leading her team and helping them deal with difficult situations, and was the escalation point from the sales perspective. And she aspired to move into the executive function, so being part of the C-suite, reporting into the CEO, which required a shift from that sort of day-to-day sales operational piece to being much more strategic around sales. There was a gap because this was the first time she'd stepped into that more strategic style role. And we looked at the position description for the role that she was being considered for, which was the executive level sales role. And then I looked at her resume and experience, and this is what I do with my interview preparation coaching, which is part of the career coaching remit. I come up with some questions that I would ask if I was a recruiter that highlight the gaps, and then we put together some responses that mitigate the gap. So you're not hiding from the fact that there is a gap. What you're doing is recognizing that there's a gap, but drawing on other experience that you may have had that you could apply in that role, in that more senior role, because that is how we grow. That's how we grow and develop. And in my experience, hiring somebody who ticks all the boxes is not always the best thing if they don't have the right attitude, if they don't have the right level of emotional intelligence to be a leader at that level, and if they don't fit the culture and the way of operating and the leadership style of that particular group. Those things are much more important than some of the technical skill. The technical skill is still important, but if there is a slight gap, that can be closed if the person has the right attitude and they have already thought about how they can mitigate that, and they've got some plans in place, or they've thought about experience that they've got that could be applied. Even though they may not have direct experience in their previous roles, they can pull from different things or model off other leaders that they have had and copy off that style. So there are ways that you can answer an interview question where you have a gap, even if it's not specific experience that you've got, but you can answer the question about what you would do and how you're going to mitigate that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it makes sense from a recruiter's point of view as well, because it's like, well, is the gap a teachable, learnable skill? Then we can work with that. Is the gap that they're a bit of a jerk? Probably not going to be able to change those more behavioral attributes.
Definitely.
But skills we can bridge. And the other thing is, if you, and this is sort of more of a challenge point, but if you are only applying for jobs that you meet 100% of the criteria, then you are doing a lot of sideways moving.
Yes, you're not growing, you're not developing.
Yeah, you're not stretching at all. You're just kind of jumping around doing things you've always done, and you're likely to take with you that feeling of stagnancy, because you're not meeting your potential. So heard it here first, folks. Just apply for the job, okay? Okay, so I think we've covered so much today, Bron, starting with who you are and what do you want, and then how are you presenting that. And I think it's not even to the workforce. And I think, being a yogi, you're sort of in tune with energetics as well. It's what are you putting out into the world?
Absolutely.
Really, because that does have a huge impact on what you're going to attract. And then in terms of the search itself, not needing to fill 100% of the criteria, but making sure that you're leveraging relationships, you're reaching out to recruiters and being quite open with what you're applying for.
Yes.
Within that bucket of intention that you've set right up front and holding on to those non-negotiables. That's the whole episode. So if you haven't listened to the last hour and you've just listened to the last minute, you haven't missed anything.
You've just wrapped it up nicely.
Just kidding. Just go back to the beginning. So if someone is right at the beginning and feeling just a bit stuck or a bit iffy, like a bit uncomfortable, what is one action that they can take?
Yeah. It is this self-inquiry piece, because that's the bit that matters. And it would be to ask yourself the question, what are the parts of my day that I enjoy the most? How can I bring more of that into my life? What would need to shift in order to achieve that? And that then begins a change in thought process away from those traditional considerations around position titles and companies, and more about the kind of work and the type of activity that that person likes to do. So the things that bring them joy, we keep coming back to that. And then from there, then you look at, well, what skills do I have that are transferable to that? And then we can start moving in that direction. But without knowing where you want to go and why, it's difficult because you get stuck on thinking about, well, I'm an HR manager, so now I need to be an HR director. And then forget about the titles. It's what are you actually doing in the job? And to give a personal example, I've been in human resources more than 20 years now. And a lot of the work has been, business partnering and dealing with employee matters and difficult conversations and coaching leaders and helping people through bullying cases and all those sorts of quite emotive, challenging pieces. And I realised that what I'm doing is not so much the technical interpretation of policy. Yes, that's what I'm doing. But what I'm actually doing is I'm working with people and I'm tuning into them and I'm trying to find a solution that works for them at their current stage, and it also works for the organisation. So it's a balancing act. How can we work together to make this happen? And then when I partner that with that sort of yoga piece around, well, what's the point of all of this? Then that's being able to work in an environment where I'm able to help people, guide them, coach them, and support them into their next shift and their next transition. That's the bit that lights me up. And being able to do it flexibly, that's perfect for me. So it's working out what are the parts of your job that you actually really love. And it may not be the technical pieces. It's the feeling around it. I'm helping people. I'm supporting them. I'm creating a solution and I'm working with their particular situation. How can I do that in a way for me? At this stage of my life, I needed the flexibility. So I can now do that for myself and I can help and guide people and lift them up. And that brings me a lot of fulfillment and joy. So it's tapping into that piece and making that work for you.
Yeah. I really thank you for sharing that, your own experience as well, because I think that another thing to take away, or that I take away from your example, is the piece where you determine what the dream job would look like. It can't be rushed and it needs to be really resonant, because think laterally. Both you and I have had long careers working in organizations and are still working. But we've created something different.
Yes.
Because we created something that aligned with that picture of what was important to us. Yes. And I think that's a really important take home. Don't think that if you can't see someone else doing it, that it doesn't exist.
That's right.
You can carve the path. Employers are doing so much more for their employees than they ever have before. Things really shifted a few years ago in terms of tipping the balance between the wants and needs of the employer versus employee. So, so many people will say, oh, well, I have to work 5 days a week, until they ask, and then they all of a sudden get to work 4 days a week. It's something they had negotiated. So just think laterally, the possibilities are out there.
That's right.
Is there anything that we've missed that you think is important that we share?
Yes, there was one piece that I realised I neglected to say. The other thing you can do using LinkedIn is, if your connections are, so say somebody you are connected to is connected to someone who works in an organisation that you'd like to work at, you can ask your connection to introduce you to them, and you can do that online. And that then expands your network. It's a warm introduction, and it means that you could then have a conversation with that person who already works in that organisation and is a mutual connection. And they may be able to give you some insights into the organisation that you're interested in working for, so you can then decide if it actually is right for you. So that is another avenue of finding out information and making an informed decision before you make a job application.
Nice. So don't underestimate how able you are to leverage your existing network online via LinkedIn, but also in life, right? Like,
absolutely,
talk to your friends,
in person,
talk to your past colleagues, open up the dialogue, ask questions and see what's out there.
And, you know, if you're on the kids sports circuit, there are a lot of parents standing on the sideline who have jobs in organisations. You know, we're not whilst we're standing on the sideline, you know, in our rugby gear watching our kids play, there are opportunities to have chats with people, and actually there could be someone that you're standing next to that might be able to introduce you to the right person. You just never know.
Well, thank you, Bron, so much for sharing all of your wisdom with us. I hope that everyone at home feels more clear, more capable, and more confident about what's possible in your career. And just remember that your next step doesn't have to be perfect. It's just about intention. You get to define success on your terms, aligned with your values, aligned with your stage of life, and what your vision is for what's next. So if this episode resonated for you, I would love it if you would share it with someone else, like it, comment below, and don't forget to subscribe. As always, thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thanks, Bron.